this on, oops, there we go. I do record this for all of us on the course room. And if you haven't seen the course room, let me know in the comments, and then I can send you a link to the original video that I did that kind of walks you through where to find things in there. Now there's layers of things because it started in January. So we have the stuff from January, the stuff from February, and now I'm putting in the stuff from March. And March is all about, it's gonna take some work. It's gonna take some work to create lasting change, right? And I think that, you know, one of the things that coaching, that I've learned about coaching, different than therapy, because obviously as a clinical psychologist, you know, people come in and they kind of know that the drill is that they're going to find their own way through therapy and you assist. But people in coaching are looking for like answers, and it's going to happen, and then I'm going to put it into action and it's going to be amazing. And what I want to talk about today is it's work. It does actually take effort on our part, and why that is, and what kind of work am I talking about. I'm really actually excited about the workbook because I put together some of my favorite journaling prompts that I've done in course rooms and in group coaching before that help us kind of start the process of what I call the work, right? But lasting change is a hard thing to create. And obviously, when we're talking about personal development and we're talking about, you know, having a growth mindset, we're talking about change. We're talking about going from old ways of doing things to new ways of doing things. I believe that I got this information from a book by Joe Dispenza, but I think like 90% of your thoughts and actions every day are thoughts and actions you did yesterday and the day before and the day before that. Think about that. Like really only about 10% of what we're doing isn't part of our autopilot system. Now, I mean, from the brain's perspective, that's a good thing, right? Because the brain knows we need to, you know, conserve energy and not, you know, not be stressing ourselves out too much. But when you are feeling stuck in your life, generally speaking, it's because somewhere in that 90%, one of the ways that you're doing things isn't actually serving you any longer. And doing the work is all about figuring out what that thing is in your 90% and having more conscious awareness. So kind of making it more like, let's try to get to 20 or 30% of the time that you're really trying to breathe new life into what you're doing from day to day. I also talk about the gift of habit. So I know that seems like those two things don't go together. They do. But for now, we're just going to talk about creating a growth mindset. So I'm going to stop right there before I get into any details. And just so you know, if you don't feel like talking, you can always put something in the chat and then I can mention that on the video as well. But any thoughts, any questions, any ideas about changing your mindset, changing how you show up in the world, taking your 10% and making it a little bit wider?
I didn't realize it was that much.
90. Right?
Oh,
it seems kind of crazy. When I looked it up, I was like, that's high. I mean, I think that parts of that are things like your heart is beating and your lungs are breathing, and you know, so some of that is autonomic nervous system and that kind of thing. But yeah, only about 10% of our life is a uniqueness every day.
I think it's being patient in the change, because they say, you know, you've been doing this all your life, but then they, you know, when you have it takes 3 weeks. I think it's going to take longer than that because you just programmed yourself to think that way. I would love it in 3 weeks, but yeah, it's being compassionate, because I can fall right back into the same old thing because that's what I'm used to doing, and then not beat myself up, which is key. Mm-hmm.
Right. I think so I'm doing this new project, and as part of it, I'm going to have an entire assessment that I'm doing with people that want to do it, where I can kind of predict for them where the deficit areas are that might be interfering in midlife, that might actually be predictors of midlife crisis. And as I've gathered the psychometrics for that, so these assessment tools to do this, it's really interesting to me that so infrequently do I see a test of self-compassion. Now, Kristen Neff, who I teach you all guys all about, she has a test on self-compassion. So thankfully, I can incorporate that in any assessment that I'm going to do. But what's interesting is when you're looking at changing your mindset or growing or personal development, I am not seeing compassion used in any fashion. And as you know, I'm a strong proponent that if you don't have compassionate self-awareness, you're already not going to be able to handle it, because you can get self-aware, but we double down in our own behavior, our old behaviors. So if we're going to be self-critical, if the inner mean girl is going to kick our butts and whip us to death, we'll go back to that 90% toot sweet. And if you show up in compassion with yourself, you're allowing yourself a different way to come at it and the possibility of growth and change. I find that really fascinating, because what I'm trying to find and what I'd like to know is how different it is, like how much faster change can happen if you're using a compassionate self-awareness versus just building awareness over time. It's a great point, though. How about Roxanne, Kathy? Anybody else have any thoughts on making change in our life and why it's work?
It's really so true to have that compassion in the mindset. And when you see it in others, remember yourself to, in turn, play it forward. So, yeah.
Yeah. Say, what do you mean by play it forward? I just was curious what you mean by that.
Well, I'm thinking of an example the other day, one of my first clients, and of course I sent the files versus something and it wasn't right, and now it's in Google Docs, but she was so compassionate for it. So today I'm out and I'm helping someone, so I just remembered our hour was up, but I hit the time off button and spent another 15 minutes just chatting with her, just compassionately listening to her stories and making sure I didn't have one eye on the clock. Because those 15 minutes were what I wanted to give back. I wanted to play it forward.
Yep. Okay. I like that. I like that a lot.
It's kind of like when you're in line at Starbucks or a coffee place where you're kind of going through your mind like, oh, this day, blah, 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 this person sucks or whatever, work sucks. And then then the lady says someone in front, you just paid for you. And you have a sudden mind shift of there are good people in this world. Life is not always negative. And then you suddenly change and say, I want to pay for the next person. It's very contagious.
It can be. It is a really interesting thing, though, when you have an interruption to the usual. So the 90%, if you interrupt it, it like suddenly conscious awareness turns online, right? And then you're at that growth edge. How about you, Roxanne? Any thoughts on change, how to bring it about, why it's work?
Really?
That's fine. Like I said, you don't have to have questions. And
Right.
you can always, as I talk, you can put stuff into the comments as well.
Right. Okay.
So, and I want you guys to be thinking as I talk today, is there any gaps? Like, have I ever had this one question about changing mindset or changing and growing in my life that I just really feel is hanging out there? I don't have an answer to. I'd be happy to tackle some of those as well today. I, kind of come at it with the subject matter that I'm going to come at it with, but there's a lot of subject matter, if I'm being honest. So let me get started. So I have this, I'm going to share it. I have this system that's in my online courses. It starts with self-awareness. It goes to self-compassion. Then we talk about empowerment and empowered decision-making. Then we talk about self-care, which always seems a little weird that I wait till the end. And then we talk about growth mindset. And today I'm going to be kind of talking about the connection between growth mindset and empowered decision making. And it's a really important connection, actually. So I'm going to stop sharing. The idea behind creating new ways of being and feeling will take an empowered decision. You're going to have to decide, I want something different than what I've had in the past, or I'm willing to put up with the discomfort and the effort I'm going to have to put forth. So empowered decision making is all about kind of keeping your cognitive agility, like keeping that flexibility in your thinking, so that when and where there are places that you could make an empowered decision, you do that. The second way that empowered decision making really comes up is where you have stuck places. So sometimes when I'm working with people or through the group coaching packages, we've talked about, like, there's a thing that I do over and over and over to myself. Like, I'm like, every time I do it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've done it again. How did I do this to myself again? So I'll share one with you of my own. I lost my mind on my daughter yesterday morning because she took the only key that we have to our car. Yep. And she lost it. And she has ADHD. And so finding it in the morning in a rush was crazy. So I absolutely lost my mind. And anytime that I have that happen, that's an old behavior. This, like, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, and then I'm not okay. And it's so familiar to me because I've been doing that, or a version of that, since I was really young. And in large part because something I learned in my family of origin is, like, you just kind of don't pay attention, go with the flow until you lose your mind because you've gone with the flow too much. So what I know in empowered decision making is, when I'm in a stuck place, I've missed an opportunity to make an empowered decision. But I have to sit, after I've watched it go down like that, then I have to sit in, what were the things that happened before that, essentially? What were the layers of things that happened before that? Compassion is really important, right? Don't like to yell at my kids. It's not my favorite aspect of who I am as a person, but I'm a parent, and we've all been there at, one point or another as parents. So I had to really sit in, like, how was it that something of that nature, I mean, it wasn't like the key was like an easy thing to get over. It was distressing in the morning, but how was it that I found myself in a position where I had nothing left to tap into in order to keep my cool while we found the key? Why was it that I just, like a hair trigger, went off? Because it's that stuck place for me means that I'm missing someplace else that I should be making empowered decisions. So I want to talk to this idea that you have to kind of look backwards in order to move forwards with growth mindset. You have to sometimes look back on why you do what you do when you do it, and understand what the ultimate goal is, so that you're going to make an empowered decision on the other side to meet that goal in a different way, right? So what I'm discovering, I've sat in this and meditated about it the last day or so. I have way too many cooks in the kitchen of my life, or pots on the stove in my life. I've got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff cooking. And my self-care hasn't gone up commensurately with that. So same amount of self-care that I've always done, but my life is getting more, scattered and has more things in it. And I didn't bring my self-care game up. So I didn't have capacity when something went awry yesterday morning. Mornings are difficult for me regardless. So it's a time when I should be tender with myself. So what I know about myself is that somewhere along the way, I didn't make an empowered decision to say no to something so I could say yes to self-care. And if I had been able to say no to something and yes to self-care, I probably wouldn't have so readily lost my mind the other morning. So what I want you guys to be thinking about is if there's this place that you're stuck or that you want to have change in, what is it that brings you to that choice point? What is it that brings you to the choice point of, I don't want to be this way anymore. This doesn't serve me. I want to be a different way. And I'll stop there and just ask that question in case any of you have thoughts on that. What brings you to that stuck place? What brings you to a place that you've decided you would like to see change?
Oh, I will agree with too many pots on the stove. Absolutely way too many pots on the stove. And by the time you get to Wednesday, you're hoping that it's Thursday and you find out it's only Wednesday. Like that was this week. And you're like, oh, and
Yep.
so that one thing I needed to get done this week didn't get done on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It got done today. And it was similar to, this is important to me. So push some of those other things that are easy to do that you have focus on and take the hard one first today. So 9 o'clock this morning, my person canceled and I said, guess what? I'm going to slide in here, that thing I needed to do today. And that was me. I just was like, this is all me today. And
yeah,
when you have so many pots, you're just like, you lose it. You lose.
You do. It just happens. And it's one of those places where I get into my I know betters. It's one of those stuck places.
I know better.
I've been here before. I know this place. I know how this goes. What? How did this creep up on me? Like I didn't know it was coming. And that, compassionate self-awareness is important so that you can look at, okay, what am I doing to myself? And how am I not getting a need met in a way that serves me? And then what could I do differently that would get a need met over here? Mm-hmm. How about you other ladies? Any thoughts about this one? Like, is there a place where you're ready for some change, but what told you that you're ready there?
I can relate to the balls in the air, many things. And I put a lot of emphasis on my job, which takes a lot of my time because, I'm a box checker. I feel good when I get things done, but now a lot more has been added to my plate. And at the same time, I don't want to keep just focusing on job. I need to since our job went remote most of the time, I'm not seeing a ton of people, need more connection. So I need to work on that. Yet I'm frustrated. Like, how do I do that? People try to help. And my thing as a kid, I isolate. I just push people away and I got it because I don't want to feel like a failure to somebody else or what about this? What about that? And then I get frustrated and I can do it myself. And that is not a good thing. It's just not a good thing. But that's how I survived as a child. Like, I got it. I can take care of this all on my own. That's my security, which is now suffocating me type thing.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean,
right.
Spin off that, Heather, what you said is, I did this for survival in childhood. That's a big indicator of, here's how I got needs met then, but it no longer serves me now. Yep. So it isn't that you don't need to get things done, but the idea of I'll just do it myself no longer really serves you in the present time. And so the need is appropriate. The means by which you're getting that need met, that's where you're in a place where you're ready for some change with that. That's
yes. And I know that. I know that, but I still, it's like automatic. Just
it is automatic. It's in the 90%. It's absolutely.
It's like,
automatic.
why did I do that again? Let's sit and think about it. But yeah. Yep.
Okay. And anything from you, Roxanne? Do you have any thoughts about a place where you would like to see some change in your life? And how did you get there?
For me, I've always been a caregiver, which I'm still doing at my old age here. And I never take any time for myself. I'm just constantly going, doing. And then when I'm totally exhausted, then I get angry and short-tempered. And so I need to figure out how to take a step back and relax. And nobody's going to go without if I just, don't decide to make that 5-course meal that they're expecting. They'll eat whatever, but nope, I'm going to do everything to make everybody happy, to try to please everybody. So yeah.
People pleasing. Oh my gosh, I was going to talk about that today too. It's like I gave you that to just see in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
People pleasing. Oh my goodness. So the workbook this week is really fun. It's all these different journal prompts that are different narrative practices. So learn to love your story. I use the model of story a lot in how I teach you to do these kinds of mindset shifts and get into a growth mindset. And they're all kind of strategies for coming at a story in a different way. But one of the things that I was, thinking about when I was going through, like, what are the pain points? What are the pain points that most women in midlife are looking at? And one of them is definitely people pleasing. One of them is definitely that. And if you catch yourself doing a thing and know that you need to stop, but you're trying to fix it within the context of people pleasing, it won't work. And that gets people frustrated. So you're trying to change things, it's effortful, but part of the work is, if you're trying to keep it within the box of what it probably won't work for you. So one of the ways if you're on the right track in change is it feels super uncomfortable. If what you're choosing to do to fix something doesn't feel uncomfortable, then I'd stay highly curious that it isn't going to actually work in fixing whatever your stuck place is, or the place that you're at where you want change. And people pleasing is a huge example of this, because women do a lot of caretaking, a lot of people pleasing. So it's not that, I don't know that I need to do more self-care if I go back to my own example, but if I try to do that within the context of making sure everybody else is happy, it probably won't work. I'll be adding a new thing of self-care, thinking I'm helping myself, but I haven't taken anything away in this idea of people pleasing. So what I really need to do is to get uncomfortable and start cutting some things out. I cannot please all the places and all the people all the time. And the person that I need to please and take care of the most is right here. Because if she's not taken care of, none of the pleasing I'm doing anywhere else is actually pleasurable anyway. It doesn't really work well if I break it, and I'm not there. So when I scream at my daughter, I'm not a great mom, right? And I'm trying to be a good mom by staying on top of all these things. Well, you know what? I'm going to have to not please someone somewhere if I don't want to lose my mind. When it's just the straw that breaks my back, that one last thing that I just can't handle in the morning. So people pleasing is one. Another one of them is just this idea of boundaries in particular. So boundaries with yourself and boundaries with other people. Now we're going to actually dig into boundaries specifically more in April, because I just love boundaries, and there's so many aspects to boundaries, and I pair it with self-care because it comes up really often with self-care. But women have a really difficult time having boundaries. Now this could be kind of a couple with people pleasing, but for whatever reason, we want to be able to take care of all the things. And we feel like if we don't take care of all the things, then we're not deserving. And that mindset, right, if we're trying to fix or change within that context, is going to keep you from being able to actually create change in your life. So sometimes those two places might be a place to go if you still are seeing yourself repeat the same thing over, and you know better now, and you're compassionate and you're watching yourself, but you might question, am I actually uncomfortable? Am I setting a boundary here? Or am I deciding not to please other people, but please myself first? Because if I am not, more than likely I'm trying to create change within the context of not changing something else, people pleasing and no boundaries. And that is what's going to cause me more distress. So ever found yourself there? Anybody want to just shout out an example of, I think that I knew I was supposed to do more self-care, for instance, but I was trying to keep all the balls in the air at the same time. Something like that. A place where people pleasing or setting boundaries would have been useful and it didn't feel comfortable. So you weren't using that as a way to grow. I love your
I've been a
faces.
huge. Oh,
Everybody
yeah,
like super quizzical. I love your faces.
the caretaking resonates with me. I did that in childhood, like take care of everyone else first. That's how I would get love. And then I could feel okay to please myself, in doing what I want. I can see myself doing that because I love taking care of people, but I
Yeah.
don't set boundaries because I feel, well, I'll be last. I'll be fine. It makes me feel good that others are happy when I help them, but then I deplete myself. So it's that role of caretaker that I'm comfortable with, but I do know that it can deplete me. So I'm aware of that now. And it is true, like put the oxygen mask on yourself before you do that to others in an airplane. It's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
true. But as a
Totally.
woman too, I got it. I can multitask. Feel good when I can check out off all the boxes. Yeah, I got gas. I got all this, and it's not even Friday. But then I'm exhausted. Like, what did I do? That was not fun. Yeah. Caretaking, it's very hard to say no to people you love.
Yeah.
It is. But there
Yep.
is a balance. There has to be a
I
boundary.
used to have a quote in my office, and I don't know who it was by, but it's like, if you named all the things you love, how long would it take you to name yourself?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
It's a big one. Other thoughts about just any places where you know that the people pleasing and boundaries thing probably is getting in the way. You're trying to outwit it. You're trying to think around it, but it's one of the two that's kind of it's going to keep you from being able to grow if you stay within those contexts. Okay. All right. Just making sure. This is it's kind of a hot button issue, to be honest, but it's a good issue. It's a good place. I do think that women more than men struggle with staying in discomfort, and we go back to some of these familiar, like, if okay, I'll change, but only if it doesn't hurt anybody else, it doesn't bother anybody else. Oh, okay, I'll do something different, but only if I can keep doing all the things that I've already been doing in my life. So, boundaries and people pleasing just get in the way of change. And I think that men have been acculturated a little more than women to take chances, to take risks, to put themselves out there. And just having the skill sets of dealing with distress, that helps the work happen. That helps you to do the work, essentially. But it is work. And I think that what's interesting is the creating of a new skill. It's not really that we're not smart enough and we don't know, creative enough, or can't come up with an idea. It's not usually that. It's usually just that we have something that's interfering with our ability to really give ourselves the energy to put towards growing our mindset, right? So earlier, Heather had brought that example of standing in line at coffee, getting your coffee, being in your head, and then somebody did something. They bought you coffee, and that disrupted the 90%. That disrupted that, oh my gosh, I've been thinking in my automatic way. And maybe, there are generous people in the world, and not everybody's a jerk. And I could buy a cup of coffee for the person behind me too. I think sometimes that chain reaction can go for quite some time at a fast food place or, coffee shop. I've heard that to be true. But what is really what I want to point out there is it's a pattern disruptor. And pattern disruptors are kind of our ace in the hole as far as getting our attention to be looking at things in a different way. So a pattern disruptor is something that's going to come in and make you pay attention and kind of come online with your 10%. And I'm going to think differently about this. I couldn't find it fast enough, but I was thinking today that there used to be like those little drawings and they were like, can you not lift up the pencil, but do this drawing? And it's like a house or something. And people struggle, right? They're like, oh my gosh, I do the four corners and I go here and here, but I can't, I don't know. I missed that part. And what the trick is to like take the line outside the entire object and then pull it back in, like you create a different shape altogether. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about pattern disruption. You need something that pulls your attention completely outside the entire thing, right? So meditation, mindfulness practice is really building up. If you're still doing it, it's really building up that medial prefrontal cortex. And what that means is that you're able to kind of step outside your life and look at it as an observer. And from that place, that's a pattern disruptor. I'm not in it. I'm actually watching myself do it. And if I can be in the space of watching myself do it, I can also be in the space of coming up with some ideas of how might I do this a little bit differently. So this narrative approach that I'm suggesting that you do in your journaling this month is all about pulling you into that observer self and creating some disruption. So instead of just doing the things as they are, I want you to take a step back and rewrite the narrative in 4 different ways and look at it in 4 different ways and see if that helps in some capacity. So the 4 ways are to become a heroine in your story. Okay. I have a little tickle in my throat. Sorry. Become a heroine, to look only at what the next right thing is, to be an author, re-author your story, and to be a narrator and re-narrate your story. And these 4 are really helpful in shifting, kind of pulling that line outside the object to pull it back in and be able to not pick up the pen or pencil and get that shape all together. These will help you take that place and look back. So what did I do in the last day or so after I lost myself on my daughter? I had to sit in meditation and I had to take a step back. And I went right away to really being upset with myself as a mom, like, oh my God, it's the worst ever. Why are you yelling at your kid? So I had to show up with some compassion, but I did actually look at that whole situation from the heroine story. So instead of looking at it like I'm a perpetrator of some awful thing on my daughter, I said, how do I rewrite this story where all the same things happened in the morning, but I actually end up the hero? How do I make it look a little bit different than this? So in being able to reflect that way, what I came up with is I can talk to her about it. I can help her understand what happened to me. And we can compare that to when she loses it because she doesn't have any, she hasn't had enough sleep or hasn't eaten or is in some way not her best self. And we can talk about how these things happen naturally. And what happens is I give myself this heroine mom moment where I'm actually being fallible in front of my kids so they know they get to make mistakes. And I'm giving solutions to my kids. And I'm showing them how to show up and be accountable after something like that has happened instead of just pretending it never happened, which is what used to happen in my house when I was younger. So being the hero in your story is a way of looking at something that's happened or is happening in your life, but coming at it from, instead of, oh my God, I'm so stuck here, or I'm mad at myself that I keep doing it this way, you're going to come at it from, how do you swoop in with a cape then? How do you make this look or feel a little bit different for you? Any ideas come to mind and places in your own life where you might do that?
Yes. My one practice that I've been doing since January is getting to bed earlier and getting to sleep. Yes, it's working.
Oh, good.
But I'm used to staying up late and doing things and putting things in order and having it all perfect for the next day. And I was trying to have everything ready, do some research. We were doing a brainstorming thing at 9 o'clock. And about 9:30 last night, I said, I'm going to go in and it's a brainstorm. I'm going to bed. So I go to bed because that was my boundary. Like, I
Mhm.
need to go to bed. I need to, get ready for tomorrow. But guess what? I'm just going to go to bed. Well, the
Yeah.
good thing is she canceled, but it was just like, oh, and then let me show the compassion because she had a sick kid. And all I replied back to her was, ugh. Not like I
Mhm.
wasn't ready or, she didn't need to know any of that. All I just wrote to her was, ugh, let me know when you want to reschedule.
Yep.
I felt wonderful
Tell me why you think you felt so wonderful about that.
because I stayed true to my getting my sleep, and there's been times when I haven't done that and you'll be like, oh, yeah, those clothes could have waited till tomorrow. Or the dishes, I wash the dishes every night before I go to bed. Like, oh, they'll wait tomorrow. So it's a mindset, right? It's a
Right.
change. The dishes are going to be there. So sleep was part of my well-being and I was staying true to my well-being.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So you showed up as a hero to you in the middle of this instead of
Yep.
staying within this box that you used to have that said things I could only be okay if things were done. Right.
Right.
So it
Right.
totally changes the narrative. The story looks a lot different when going to bed and showing up unprepared, essentially the next day and saying,
Yeah.
is actually
That's the
best.
old me.
Yes.
The old me. I'm not going to be perfect anymore. That's the old me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, where I think that becoming the heroine in your story can be the most effective is in these kind of cardinal stories that generated one of these stuck behaviors. So in my family of origin, everybody would just like be okay, put up with things and then lose it. And then nobody talked about it. That was, a cardinal story in my family of origin that like, that was okay. I can rewrite the narrative. I don't have to be just like my family because that's what I was taught. I can take that very same behavior and actually create a whole different circumstance in how I show up with my daughter in course correcting what happened, just a natural thing. That's what happens. So for me, I think that becoming the heroine really can take old stories and make them new stories, essentially. Take old narratives and make them new narratives in your present day life. And so I think that this particular technique is really helpful for those very stuck places. Mm-hmm. Next is do the next right thing. And the next right thing is a principle that is like, you're going to take all of this, worry and angst and overwhelm about how am I going to make all this stuff happen in my future. And you're going to pull it all back to just the step in front of you. So I guarantee you that when worry, when overwhelm, when fear about what decision am I going to make is coming up, that you are probably several steps ahead of the present decision, right? So I was talking to a client this week and they talked about how there are going to be layoffs, big business, there are going to be layoffs. We're in midlife. And so the midlifers and above kind of get the do you want to retire early letter? And that came out and it started, a lot of angst in the client. And they were really uncertain, like, could I take this and then find a different job? Or do I, hold out and hope that doesn't mean that I'm one of the people in a layoff? How do I? And so I stopped them and I said, what's the decision right in front of you? Not how is this all going to end up in 5 different case scenarios, what if scenarios, but what is literally just the next thing that you have to do? The next thing that I have to do is just decide if I am going to respond, I'd be interested or not interested. And what does that do once you've done that? Well, that just gives me 2 more weeks, because they aren't going to talk about layoffs for another 2 weeks. So in that 2 weeks, other people that are interested in the retirement package are going to talk about it and figure out if that's something that's for them. But I don't have to, until I know the next piece of information, there's no other decision point for me. Okay, so let's change the story. Instead of, what about this? What if this? What if this? What if this? Just to, what is the one thing that I need to do right now? Let me make that decision and then wait for the next right thing in front of that decision, and only do that thing, and then wait till the next right decision after that one. Instead of, I need to know what's happening 6 steps ahead of me presently. That is definitely a generator of a lot of anxiety. Thoughts about that one?
That's spot on. I'm always like, I think of the end result. And then, okay, how do all the little steps gonna affect the end? And I try to like plan it all out. So yes, trying to tell me just do the first one is just
Yep.
a foreign concept, because I say, well, what if I say yes to this now? Will that affect the end, or should I say no? And then you get paralyzed and you do nothing.
Yep.
But you still think about the
Yep.
end result. So true, small steps, but I always want to know the ending. And it's that
Mhm.
control thing that makes me feel safe. So it's like,
Yep.
well, okay, just stop the what ifing, because that's only is not helping. So it's such a
Mhm.
simple concept that you talk about, but it's so dang hard to implement when you're so used to planning it all out. Oh, and I love to plan, but it's a detriment sometimes, especially when you want
It
to get
can be. I mean, it also can be one of our greatest assets, right? We're very
Yep.
organized people that are like that.
Yes.
But
Yes.
something you said control is how I deal with that anxiety, and it feels good to have the control. I'll just mention that control is actually the near enemy of anxiety. So this is what I mean by that. Control actually grows anxiety. It's not an antidote to it, but it's a near enemy because it's a natural thing. We want to control things, and we convince ourselves that it's a better thing to do if we control things. The actual antidote to anxiety is trust. Okay. And in that scenario, Heather, it would be to trust yourself that whatever comes down the pike, the future version of me is going to handle. Right.
That's very
Which
good. Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of another way to come at next right thing. Sometimes when you really have a hard time letting go of, but what if this and what if that? I'll say, okay, so now imagine the version of you that's up there in the future and is okay with whatever happened. We don't know what happened, but they're okay with it. Okay. What one thing would they tell you you need to do right now? Just one thing. If they were going to tell you there's one thing you could do right now, what would they tell you? And it changes how, I mean, we go outside of that box and it changes how we're looking at it. Because if I feel okay about it in the future, what I'm going to want for the earlier me is to chill out. Because I know if I'm chilled out, I'm better able to take on the 5 next steps that are going to come after that, right? Almost always that's going to be what the future version of me is going to say is, how do I take care of Natalie so that she's her best version of herself when these next steps start coming, right? Can't stop that she's going to have to go through them. But if I was going to give her one step to do, it would just be chill out. Like, I just want you to do the one thing in front of you. And so that's another way to come at this idea of next right thing. But this one's a really good one. It really, it does work though on this idea of you have faith in yourself that if I just do this, that, you know, the version of me tomorrow will know what to do next. And the version of me after that will know what to do next. You really do have to have faith in yourself. Control implies that you don't have faith in yourself to be able to do this.
That's really good.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts?
I will just say that I like that. And I'll watch the replay wherever we are in this time, because there's so much that we can't control. I don't know about you ladies, but technology is spinning super fast. And what I'm learning today is not going to be the same tomorrow, but just keep chugging along because it'll get a little easier. So my future self will know what to do. I'm not going to be perfect right now. And just let that control go. Let that control go.
Yep. Yep.
But whatever you said, that was really good. I'm going to go back and re-listen to that part.
Yeah, go back and
control it. The anxiety is trusting in yourself, something like that. So
yeah. The antidote to anxiety is trust, and the near enemy of anxiety is control, because we think the control is best, but it's actually our enemy. It's working against us, and it keeps making anxiety big. Because if you control one thing, you're going to have to control another one and another one and another one, and it just starts to breed itself. But trusting is like, I have to have one answer. Actually, I don't even have to have any answers. I just trust that whatever's in front of me, I'll be able to handle it. And I think this is that's a hard thing to grasp when you're young. So when I talk about this in a group of people that have had some years and wisdom behind them, they're like, I know exactly what you're talking about. Because if I look back, like, I always made it through. I'm betting on me that I'm going to figure this out. Like, I can have trust in that. But when you're younger, it's kind of hard to have that, like, just wrap your brain around trusting yourself to be able to just handle everything, because you really still believe that near enemy. The way I'm trusting myself is I trust that I know all the things and I'm controlling all the things, but it's not the control that's doing it. All right, so the last two are kind of, they're versions of a similar thing. So authoring and re-narrating, reauthoring and re-narrating your story. Sometimes when we come up against like social conditioning, family rules, religious rules, culture at a job, we are really up against other people's ideas of who we should be or what it is to be the best version of us. And that gives them quite a bit of power. But this is something that's kind of in the background all the time. That's what we're doing. It's like asking a fish, do you know what water is? Like, this is, they're living in it, so they don't know. And you're living in lots of different rules, regulations, definitions of what's good and what's not good, that you don't even really notice you're doing it. But in your stuck places, more than likely, you've given a lot of power over to one of these conditions or one of these rules. And what you want to do with narrating and reauthoring is to look at it a little bit differently. So a narrator, if you read a book, a narrator is kind of that bodiless voice that kind of tells you what's happening along the story. It's not a character in the story, not a participant in the story, but just somebody that's kind of like, and then the next thing, and then the next thing. So when you re-narrate, you're again taking that step back into the observer self, and that capacity is growing in you if you continue to do your meditation like we started in January. What we are hoping to accomplish by taking that step back is to see where those rules and conditions are and ask ourselves, does this really serve me? Does it really serve me or not serve me? Is there another rule or condition that I could glom onto here that supersedes the one that I'm already in, right? So for me, to go back to my example, if I have an idea in my head that a good mom never yells, that really restricts my story. But if I take a step back and I say, like, I don't think parents should yell, so I'm not actually going to throw that rule out necessarily. I don't like that I did that, but I have this other condition, which is I am supposed to teach these kids to be good humans in the world. And humans make mistakes. And this is an opportunity for me to help humanize myself in front of my kid, to give them an example of how to handle mistakes when they will do them inevitably, right? So now I'm choosing that narration, same story, same situation of me yelling at my kid, losing my stuff, But what I'm looking at now when I re-narrate it is that particular rule or condition rather than the one I was getting trapped in prior to that, that had me being really self-critical that I had yelled at her at all in the first place, right? So that's re-narration. Re-narration is a little bit easier than reauthoring because re-narration isn't asking you to change any rules. It's not asking you that. It's asking you, does this one serve me? Or is there another one I could choose that serves me? And I'll narrate in the background a different narrative that helps me feel better about this. Reauthoring would say, I can't find a rule. I can't find a condition in culture that tells me this is okay. So I'm going to have to rewrite it. I'm going to have to just create something brand new. I always, and the video that I put up in the course this week, I always use the example of my divorce because it's just an easy one for me to grasp. But divorce has lots of connotations in this country. And it has other, your families have other ideas about that. Religion has other ideas about that, all sorts of things, right? Almost, I've never found one that's really pleasant or makes you look like a hero or any of those things. They all are very judgmental and critical of the people that go through the divorce. So I don't really have another, rule to grab that makes me feel better about it. So I had to make up a new one. So my new one is that it was really courageous of me to make the decision that I was not doing any good for my kids or myself by staying in a marriage that wasn't working for me, and that my partner was not coming alongside me to fix that. I wanted to fix it, but they were not coming alongside me to fix it. So I did a very brave thing, courageous thing coming out of that. And I really value that courage. And I really emphasize that courage when people talk to me about second divorce, first divorce, whatever. Like, it's hard to be a divorced female in this world, especially in your midlife. So I emphasize and created a new rule for myself that was actually the better choice of the choices I would have had. So that's reauthoring. It's a little bit harder to stomach. And it really does take a lot of creativity, but it also it does take a certain amount of courage to just say, yeah, all of your rules, America, they don't work for me. I'm just going to go over here and say, this is okay for me. Yeah, another example could be women's bodies. Like, there's a lot of very specific ideas of what beauty looks like for women. And I think that one of the ways that we have to show up to that is by reauthoring it, because there's nowhere anywhere where it says midlife women look good as they are, with soft bellies and wrinkles and skin that isn't as elastic as it was 10 years ago. Nowhere, no one's saying that in Cosmopolitan or Vogue or any of those places. You don't see it a ton in the media. You don't see any of these representations in the media very, very well, in movies, whatever. So we just have to rewrite it for ourselves and say, this right here, this is beautiful. I just have to rewrite that narrative, because there's nowhere in culture where I can grab it that it tells me that I look good, essentially. In fact, they want to sell me creams and all the things. Now, I like stuff because I like makeup. I like all that stuff, but that's part of my version of beauty that I'm choosing for myself, and not necessarily a rule that was written for me. So that's re-narration versus reauthoring. And these are the 4 different ways that I give you in the workbook this month to wrap your head around, like, how might I do the work, because it is work, to see this a little bit differently. I want you to remember that in rewriting this, if it doesn't feel uncomfortable, what you're trying to do, then it probably isn't going to stick, because you're probably using something familiar that's going to pull you right back into that 90% of old thoughts and belief systems. So in order to really kind of bring a new individual approach to it, if you're on your growth edge, you're really taking a risk and feeling a little uncomfortable, feeling a little outside your norm if you're doing it. thank you, you guys. Any thoughts or anything else as we close tonight?
Amazing.
Yay!
Lots of
I love
good,
that one.
lots
Thanks,
of good,
Roxanne.
lots of good things. I took lots of notes. Yes, yeah. Lots,
You
lots
explain
of,
things so well. Thank you,
Oh,
Natalie.
You're welcome.
You do. I love
You're-
all your examples. It helps to understand, you know, like we all have issues and it's really cool. Like those examples can help jog your mind to how to reframe your own. I appreciate that in you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
It just makes it better. It's more real, I think. And the concepts themselves are stuff that we can grasp, but if you don't put it into action, it makes it really hard to kind of wrap your head around abstractly how you would do that in your own situation. Mhm. All right. Well, thank you guys. It was lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, have a good rest of your day and month, and make sure to go over to the course room because it's got all the goodies in there for you to add to this.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right.